If you've ever wondered how Airbnb investors protect their properties from wild parties and damage while boosting their profits, this episode is for you. Today, we're diving into how smart hosts are using technology to save time, prevent losses, and scale their portfolios without sacrificing guest experience or peace of mind. You'll hear from a former Apple engineer who founded Minut, a company that's helping over 50,000 Airbnb hosts in 100 countries prevent parties, protect their assets, and even automate guest comfort, all with one small, easy-to-install device. From noise monitoring and smoke detection to leak prevention and motion sensing, this conversation will teach you how to safeguard your Airbnb, keep your neighbors happy, and even increase your cash flow so you can focus on what really matters, living the life you love through Airbnb investing. Let's jump in. Can you share a real example where Minut helped a host prevent a party or a bad situation before it turned into a nightmare?
This is what we do day in and day out, and this is happening hundreds of times every month. So that's the typical case that someone is starting to throw a party and we contact the guest and then they go out to a bar or they take it to the town instead. But we've had some more amusing stories as well. We had a customer in Canada, they got an alert that the temperature was dropping in their property. So they went out thinking that a guest had probably left a window open, which apparently happened before. And they did find the window open, but they also found a bear inside. So that was the visitor. It was not actually the previous guest.
Oh my gosh, bear detection. We might actually need that at a few of our cabins.
Right. Nils, what inspired you to leave Apple and start Minut? Was it a personal experience?
That was actually the startup itch. I grew up in Sweden and then I moved to California, worked for Apple in my early 20s. And a lot of people around me eventually started startups. And I was really inspired to see the success of my friends. I loved Apple, but after having been there for 7-8 years, I wanted to try being at a smaller company. The idea actually came from a chance encounter with one of the first employees at Airbnb. We met at a bar in San Francisco, and he was telling me how they had these issues with people putting up cameras. From a guest perspective, that's something that's quite appalling, but you could also have a bit of empathy with the host who was inviting someone new into their home. I saw that as a quite interesting problem because I had been doing a lot of work with how you can use machine learning while still preserving privacy. And so I saw these two things coming together and figured maybe this is my startup.
That's amazing. So you were like, there's an issue. People hate having cameras because it makes them feel exposed, but hosts want to have cameras because without having them, they feel exposed. So you're like, wait a second, this is a problem that I can solve with machine learning?
Yeah, exactly. We saw that problem and figured you can, of course, monitor a space without intruding on the privacy of people there. For example, just measuring noise levels rather than actual audio or video. You can know that something is going on, but you don't have to know exactly what it is. And so finding that balance between hosts and guests, I thought was a quite interesting and rich problem. And of course, now we do privacy conscious monitoring for Airbnb hosts with large portfolios to small portfolios. We also do work in student housing and apartment hotels, multifamily. There's a lot of places where you have this landlord with an interest to protect their property, but also the guest experience that you have to take into account. So this has become our niche, if you will.
That's fantastic. So for our listeners, how would you explain Minut, not in tech terms, but in terms of peace of mind and cash flow protection?
You can see it as an insurance policy. If something were to go wrong in your property, for example, a guest throw a big party, which obviously hurts your neighbor relations. It can, in many cases, cause you to risk your license to operate. It can be a quite existential threat, not counting just like the damages. What Minut does is detect the signs that, for example, a crowd is forming or loud noise levels. And then we close the loop. So we detect these things. And then the first thing we do is we contact the guest and let them know that they're now out of bounds. And what we see is that actually solves more than 80% of issues right away. Most of the times these things happen, it's not because people are bad. People are just on holiday and they're in a good mood and they might go a little bit overboard. So that's the core case and what people think about most when they hear Minut.
And let's just break it down a little bit. You monitor for noise, smoke, right?
Yeah.
So tobacco or marijuana. Can you differentiate between the two? Or is it just smoke?
For legal reasons, we don't actually, because there are some states where it's not legal and where if you know that a crime is happening, you have an obligation to report.
Okay.
And we're all about making our host's life easier. So therefore, we actually don't differentiate, even though from a technology perspective, you could probably do it.
So we've got noise level, smoke, and you monitor for the number of people. Do you do that via cell phones?
Yes, we count the number of devices that come into a property. So it's not a perfect gauge for exactly how many people, but it gives you an idea. There's a crowd forming, for example. And then we do indoor climate monitoring. So if you have a property in either a very hot climate or a very cold climate, you know how important it is to make sure that both the guests have the right comfort, that ACs, etc., are working, but also to prevent pipes from freezing and leaks, etc.
So there's two things there to unpack, right? It's both leak detection and freeze detection.
Yes, but different sensors. So we have a water leak sensor that you can place in places where there is a risk for leaks. But then we also have the sensor that goes in the ceiling that measures the humidity in the property, and it can detect if there is suddenly a humidity spike. And I just had someone reach out to me the other day saying that they had a high humidity alert, which turned out to be a pretty catastrophic leak from the neighbor above. And so that was one of the things where I think we paid for the product about 100 times over.
Help me understand, how big is your product? It sounds complicated and like I have to wire it in, but I'm sure you've made it simple.
We've worked hard to make it simple. The device itself, it's about the size of the palm of your hand. You install it into the ceiling on a magnetic plate that comes with a double-sided tape. So you just pull that off, you put the magnetic plate in the ceiling, and then you're up and running within minutes.
I can do that.
It's about the size of a smoke detector, and I would say actually easier to install than a smoke detector. So if you can do that, then you can definitely do ours. And then it connects to the Wi-Fi you already have, which is, of course, also useful because that means it can monitor the Wi-Fi network.
How much does Minut cost?
Our standard subscription is $10 a month. And then, of course, if you run larger portfolios, we offer volume discounts.
Excellent. So do you charge it all for
The hardware
the unit?
piece?
The hardware is about $100, and then the subscription is another $10 per month. But we believe you can pretty quickly get good ROI on that just in terms of the damage that you can prevent. And if you have
damage or just the cleaning, the extra cleaning fees that come with someone throwing a larger party at your house, that would be instantaneously covered.
Or cigarette smoke is another one, right? You might have to rent an ozone machine.
I had a real life example about a week ago where a client, and this is a case that I had recommended Minut, a client's housekeeper showed up and the house reeked of smoke. And the host contacted the guests to say, hey, you broke the house rules, you smoked, we need to charge you. And the guest's response was, how can you prove it? Where's your evidence? Didn't deny it, just straight off, you can't prove it. And I was like, I got a solution for you going forward. You need to invest in Minut and you can avoid these things and or have some documentation to provide to Airbnb in case one of these situations occurs.
And I think that's unfortunately the case as host. Whenever there is a word against word type of dispute, we see Airbnbs and the other OTAs, they're almost always siding with the guest, right? So having a bit of documentation, having a bit of data can help in many situations. Also in cases like, did the guest actually show up? Did they spend time there? This is metadata that can be quite helpful to have whenever there are these type of conflicts.
Have you found that Airbnb has been supportive of your data to say that there was 10 people there, not 2, or the noise level was high, or the smoke was present?
I'm very proud of our relationship with Airbnb. Actually, it is really easy from within the Minut platform to create a report that you can then take to Airbnb for air cover. And that tends to work really, really well. And we're also working directly with Airbnb to make sure that their staff is trained for it. It's not always that this works out, of course, but having a little bit of data in what would otherwise be a complete he said, she said is very helpful.
Let's go back to the noise just for a minute. So I have a device installed. It's starting to get noisy. Do I set a decibel threshold? And what happens when that threshold gets passed?
Every property is different, and your Airbnb might have a higher threshold for what you deem acceptable or not, right? So we don't impose a one size fits all. you install it, it can be helpful to see what the noise is for a few days and decide where to set it. But then we'll make it easy for you to set it up the way you want it. What we see as the most effective is that you then connect it to either your PMS or to Airbnb, so that Minut, when we detect noise that goes above the thresholds that you've set, then we contact the guest directly. You as a host don't necessarily need to be in the loop, because that allows the guest to self-regulate. And the earlier you would do this, less likely you are to have any issues down the line. Then, of course, there are escalation mechanisms. So like if a guest isn't responding, we can place a phone call. If they're not responding to that, eventually you as the host might have to get involved. But you have that record about what messages has been sent when and what the guest has responded. And most of the time, as I said, most people are good people. They are responding. We're so sorry. We didn't realize it. Tell the neighbors we're sorry. And that's the end of it.
So if that noise threshold gets crossed, Minut is attached to, say, my Hospitable or my PMS account, and a message then goes out from your platform directly to that guest. What's that message sound like?
That's up to you. You can, of course, adapt this to your tone of voice, and you can decide whether you want to do it through text messages or the Airbnb platform, or if you use Hospitable, it's a great platform. You can also set up communications there. You can set it up in a way where it behaves like you would in that situation, but you can be completely hands-off.
That's wonderful. So you can be empathetic and not like you're doing something wrong, but hey, we heard from our neighbors that it's a little bit loud over there. Could you please turn down the music? And I could see, like you said, getting ahead of that instead of waiting until perhaps guests have had a few more cocktails or, a few more people come over. But at the very beginning being like, oops, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize A, that I was making a mistake, and B, that that I'm making a mistake. I think that's brilliant.
And I like how you said getting ahead of it. I had another situation with a client last week. We were talking about this, and they're in a town that's kind of a college town, and they've had a couple problems already where college kids had rented and caused problems for the neighbors. So it's like, not only putting this device to be able to respond if something happens, you can put it in your messaging ahead of time to say, we employ these technologies to monitor for guest count, for smoke, for volume. So this isn't the place for you, right? If you're here to have a party, we're going to monitor these things. We're going to know. Our neighbors are going to know. And so you can get that far in front of it, even in your booking messaging.
Yeah. Depending on your market, that makes
Yeah.
If you're in a college type town where that's at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. This disclosure, I think, solves a lot of issues. It can also be quite comforting for a guest, right? Like when you're new in a neighborhood, you might not know what sort of the social norms are, what hours there are. And getting the information that if you are out of bounds, we will tell you, that can actually be quite comforting and can give people a better experience as well. So we like this balance, right? We really like to achieve that win-win scenario where the product is actually making life better, not just for the host, but for the guest and the wider community as well. So that's something that we put a lot of work into to make sure we get this balance right.
Could you give us an example of how Minut has helped improve guest experience?
Yeah, we leverage data from the climate monitoring, and we work with Google Nest to make sure that the indoor climate is perfect for guests when they arrive, but then when the property is empty, that it goes into an energy saving mode, both saving money for the host, but also providing a better experience for the guest. I also think your example around the cigarette smoke, we've all had the time when we checked into a hotel room or an Airbnb and someone has smoked there before, and it's a pretty bad experience as a guest. But if you can detect that and make sure that you've cleaned it up properly before the next one arrives, it's helping you combat bad reviews and making sure that you provide a consistently high standard for your guests.
And I'm thinking also with your detection of devices and people in the space, can you tell a guest that they can have early check-in because your housekeeper has left because there are no devices in the Airbnb?
When you want to detect whether a property is vacant, we usually use the motion detection, and you can set it up so that it essentially triggers a notification when it notices that a guest has checked out on the checkout day. And that can be a trigger for you to get the cleaners there early, and then maybe you can actually sell an early check-in.
Okay, I'm sold.
I love this. Yeah. There's going to be an order for 14 coming in directly after this interview. You work with hosts from all over the world. What has surprised you the most about the short-term rental industry as it's matured?
What I find so good about this industry is that it's full of small entrepreneurs who are not necessarily competing that much with one another. I will speak to a host in America and someone on a Caribbean island, and they will never compete. So that means that they are very collaborative and friendly. I've worked in other industries in the past, which had a very, very different sort of atmosphere. And I really appreciate this about the short-term rental and maybe hospitality in a wider sense, that people are very generous and welcoming. And if you are in this industry, don't take it for granted. It's really fantastic that people are so open to sharing their experiences and sharing their advice, and we're sort of learning together.
What a great observation. And you're right. No one gets into Airbnb investing and hosting because they hate working with people and are difficult in nature. Most people have some place that they love and want to share it with other people and also make a profit.
We are in the hospitality business, so we're hospitable to one another.
100%. All right, Nils, if you had a crystal ball, what changes do you see coming that hosts need to prepare for now if they want to keep growing?
So obviously, AI is reshaping a lot of the things that we do, and there has been a lot of discussion and conversation about what's changing. And I think it's important to look at the flip side of it as well, what is not changing, and perhaps double down on a few of those things where we know for a fact that they will always be true. So great guest experience. When we're starting to automate and automate more, we mustn't forget that this is why our customers are coming, and that's why they're coming back. It's really hard to look like many years ahead now. If you think about it, going back just 2 years, ChatGPT and these bots, like you might have tried something like it, but it didn't really work, right? Now, Minut messaging is able to respond to over 80% of the incoming messages that we see. And of course, that's due to the advancements that we've seen on the underlying models just in a few short years. So I think that is going to become really uncanny. And I think you just have to be early on that, adopt it, try it, see what works for you, and then use the time that you just freed to invest in the things that isn't changing as quickly.
That's exactly what I was thinking as you were giving that answer. I love that you wrapped up with the AIs and the technologies, right? In Minut allows us to be more human, right? So the things that we can automate, and technologies and information and data we can gather allows us to be better hosts and more human and more hospitable, like the things that can't be automated, because there's more freedom and time to do the things that can't be automated.
Yeah, outsource the things that you don't like to do that are just monotonous, and then focus in on the guest experience and really connecting with your guests and the things that make us human and hard to replicate.
I'm glad we're on the same page.
All right, Nils, if our listeners want to protect their properties, what's the best way for them to learn about Minut and get in touch with you, the company?
The easiest is probably just go on our website. It's www.minut.com. I'm also very available. They can email me. I'm nils@minut.com. Reach out to any of our salespeople.
I just sort of noticed in the checkout process, do you basically start with the hardware first or the service package first?
So we sell them in one package. There's no way to use the hardware without the service. So that's why we sell them together. We want to be very clear on that.
That makes sense. Well, listeners, if you have one Airbnb, if you have 20 Airbnbs, if you worry at all about your property safety, your guest safety, if you'd like to be able to upsell early check-ins and let your housekeeper know when people have left early, this is such a fantastic product, and we would love to hear your thoughts on it. Thank you, Nils, so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please share it and subscribe. The more you share our show, the more Airbnb investors will find it and fast-track their journey to financial freedom. The reason we do this is to benefit the Airbnb investing tribe. And remember,
our joy is in your success.